Hello and welcome to UU Elevate Tool eLearning Module 5, where we'll be covering off tabs 5 to 9 of the Site Waste Management Plan. This is the site-based part of the Site Waste Management Plan, the actual implementation of it. So in tab 5 we'll be covering off duty of care. That's where we input all the waste carriers as licenses and exemptions, information like that. Tab 6 is where we cover off how the Site Waste Management Plan is going to be communicated to the site staff so that everybody's clear on who's doing what. Tab 7 is the meaty part of the management plan. That's where we input our actual waste volumes as they're produced on the job. Tab 8 is where we have our monthly or quarterly progress review updates and any changes, concerns, observations, etc. are noted on there. And then finally, tab 9, once the project's finished, a complete review beginning to end of the Site Waste Management Plan is undertaken to take note of what the successes, any failures of the Site Waste Management Plan were, and carry forward any lessons learned. So let's have a look at each tab in detail. So carrying on from where we left off in Module 4, we'll go into our fictitious project, Dirty Town UID. Click on the Site Waste Management Plan and progress straight to tab 5, Duty of Care. The input is presented with another waste management declaration, which basically stipulates that the signee will agree to the requirements of the SO8 contract and any legislation relating to management of waste. So you tick the box to agree and date it the date that the project commences on site. If this is the first time you're visiting this page, the first thing that needs to be done is that your waste management contract is needed to be added at a company level. This only needs to be done once, but can be a little bit onerous to begin with. So you should start by collecting together all your waste management contractors' certificates, their addresses, contact details, things like that. So if you click here to add or edit a waste management contractor's details, you'll be taken through to an input page. Given that this is a test area, we already have a bunch of fictitious waste management companies. Your form may be blank if it's the first time you're visiting here, but click on the grey Add button to begin inputting your first contractor. And you're presented with a standard input form requiring the company's name and address, town that they're based in, etc., contact name, point of contact, telephone number. If at any point you find that you're not using the contractor in question, maybe their license is expired and you're not happy with their practice, etc., you can tick this box here, and that will basically bench that contractor, take them off any drop-down lists later on in the management plan. That can be unticked at any point as well. And then you simply select whether they are a carrier and/or facility destination and/or a broker. And once you've inputted their details, hit save and they'll be added to the table. You'll then be taken to their licenses and destinations page, where you can add license details relating to their carrier's license or their waste facilities or destinations. You do that in the same way by hitting the add button underneath, entering their carrier number that's shown on their certificate, their issue date, the expiry date, and ideally a PDF scan or JPEG photograph of their license, and hit save again. Similarly for their waste facilities or destinations, hit add. You'll be taken to an input form. Input their details into the form. Point of note, the site name and location is what appears on the drop-down list, so you may want to add specifics about their location if they have multiple transfer stations. It's important to input the waste site classification, the type of facility that it is, because this has an impact on the recycling and recovery rates of different waste types. For example, for transfer stations or materials recycling facilities, Elevate assumes that only 50% of the material is recycled if it's sent to them in a mixed state, and 80% if it's segregated. For landfill sites, Elevate assumes that there's zero recycling if it's sent to them, unless it's soil or stone, and then it claims 50% of that being recycled because it's usually used for engineering capping. And for an exemption or a standard permitted site, Elevate assumes that 100% of it's recycled if it's segregated waste, only 50% recycled if it's mixed waste, and also 100% recycled if it's sent as homogeneous stone, soil, brick, concrete, tiles and ceramic. So once you've chosen the facilities classification type, hit save. You're then taken to a page similar to before where you're able to put in the permit or exemption number for the site. So hit edit and input the same details as before: the permit number, issue date, the expiry date, and a scan of the permit, and hit save. Where you have selected that your waste facility is a transfer station and you have an EA report that shows that their recycling rates are higher than the defaults that Elevate uses, you can add the specific recycling rates by clicking on the button. You'll be taken to this recycling rate records where you can add them specifically. So the EA report should be dated for a period, so you put the beginning and end periods in here. You input their specific recycling rate for mixed wastes. The segregated waste recycling rate defaults to 80%, but what you can do if the facility you're using has better rates than that, for specific waste streams you can input the recycling rates for bricks, concrete, etc., all waste types, individually in here. Once you've inputted these specific recycling rates, Elevate will calculate any waste streams entered in these date ranges as per the actual recycling rates that you've inputted, not the default ones. Hit back to go back to the waste contractors recycling rates, back again, and back again to be taken to the main menu. Finally, go up to the project Site Waste Management Plan Home and return to tab 5, Duty of Care. Once you're satisfied that you've entered all the waste management contractors at a company level that you need, you then need to assign those contractors that are actually going to be serving this job, this project. So you do that by clicking on the hyperlink below. You'll then be presented with a pick list of all the contractors that you've entered. So I'll scroll down and find Joe Bloggs Waste Management, tick them, tick their transfer station because that's where the waste is going to be going, and then hit save at the bottom. You'll then be brought back to the front page of the project, so just go back into the Site Waste Management Plan, tab 5, Duty of Care, and you'll see that Joe Bloggs have appeared on this project's Duty of Care page. The final part of the Duty of Care tab is if the site is going to be producing more than 500 kilos of hazardous waste a year. In this eventuality, the site has to be registered with the Environment Agency. And you tick this box to say that you've done that, and then enter the registration number and date details. Final point of note is that BRE offer further assistance if you're struggling to find any local waste management contractors. If you click on this hyperlink, you'll be taken to the BRE-Map tool, which is self-explanatory and will help you identify the most appropriate waste management contractor in the area of your project. Once you're satisfied that you've completed all parts of this page, tick the box here to say all the information has been entered and hit submit. And if we go to the Site Waste Management Plan Home, as a reminder, you'll see that the green tick has appeared to say Stage 5 is complete. Now let's have a look at the Training tab. The Training tab helps you coordinate the dissemination of the plan across to the key people who are going to be implementing it on site. As the tab says, everyone on site should receive relevant training covering off the Site Waste Management Plan, who's doing what the waste procedures for segregation, placement, storage, reuse, etc. are going to be on the site, details of hazardous waste, duty of care responsibilities, material storage, so on and so forth. So depending on the complexity of the waste management plan, you're invited to select whether it's just going to be covered off at induction, whether specific toolbox talks are going to be held, or for more complicated schemes whether a workshop will be held. If you keep a training log in your environmental control plan on site, that's fine, just enter that. Or alternatively, a scanned copy can be uploaded to the system. Once you've entered all that information, hit save. Another alternative is that training logs can be entered directly onto the tool here. So you can just enter the training recipient's details and it will be recorded directly onto the system, and hit submit. The final part of the training tab is wider communication of the swamp. How are you going to be communicating it across the site? Regular meetings should be held. Perhaps posters are going to be posted in the mess areas. Feedback from staff will be useful to keep an eye on what's working and what isn't working. Once you're happy with this tab being completed, again tick the all required info button, hit submit. So now let's move on to tab 7, the main part, where we input the actual waste figures. Clicking on tab 7, you'll be presented with the actual versus forecast waste information. The figures that you see here in front of you are taken from the waste forecast that was done earlier on for this fictitious project. So here's all our forecast quantities. We haven't input any actuals yet, so these are all 0. There's the difference, 100% difference. We also have a graphical representation of these figures as a bar graph for all our forecasts are shown as green bars, and as we enter actual waste, gold bars will appear for comparison alongside. To enter actual waste data, click here at the top. Alternatively, you can go directly from the project home shortcuts and select add waste data from there. So that can be done from the project home page. You're then taken to the waste data input form. So you simply enter all of the bolded information, the date of the transfer, select from the carrier our waste contractor who's going to be taking the waste away, that's who we input before, the destination site, it's either going to be reused on the site ideally or taken elsewhere for recycling, the waste transfer note number. This can be an individual waste transfer note ticket or a series of tickets, as long as the reference number on the paperwork is identifiable in here. So for example, you could put the waste transfer note, the beginning number, and then a dash, and then the last number in the sequence. That would suffice. The container reference is a free field. You may choose to use this to marry up with your own internal procurement references. You can select the container type that the waste has gone off site in. This is an exhaustive list of every conceivable type of container. And the commonly used ones will be hidden in and amongst there somewhere. For example, 9 cubic meter 6-wheel tipper, we'll select one of those. The system uses the volume of the container type and then multiplies it by the compaction rate and the waste type to come up with a weight. So the compaction rate is quite an important thing to consider. The way I like to think of it is normal and compacted waste will be things like your office waste, your canteen waste that's in black bin bags, something that has waste that have a lot of void space in them. Select the top one for that. For slightly compacted waste, or let's say aggregates that have a natural slump but still quite a bit of airspace within them, you may want to select the slightly compacted option. Machine compactors tend to be for baling machines, hydraulic compression tools that squeeze all the airspace out of something. Or if you're not comfortable with the defaults, you can enter a specific void space here and enter it in. Multiple containers can be entered under a single data entry. So for example, if we had 20 of these 6-wheel tippers going off, all carrying the same material, you can enter that here and that'll save you doing the repetition of this form for every individual load. The overall tonnage can be entered, so instead of using the calculation based on the volume and the density here, if you know the actual tonnage, that can be entered into this form here and it will override the calculation that Elevate does based on this information above. Finally, in order to facilitate the identification of each waste stream, it's important to differentiate which waste activity the material has come from. So think of construction waste as being packaging wastes, anything resulting from consumables, so pallets, wooden packaging, plastic wrapping, things like that. They'd come from construction waste. Demolition would be crushed concretes, salvage woods, roof tiles, glass and things like that from demolishing structures. And then finally excavation would tend to be soils, clays, stones, made ground, anything that was dug out of the ground. So select the activity type accordingly. If you only have one type of material going off, tick that the container is segregated, and then you'll be able to choose which of the materials is in this load. Alternatively, if the waste going off site is somewhat mixed, untick segregated and then enter the percentage estimate of each waste time that's mixed in. So for example, I've estimated 50%. So for example, I've estimated here that these 26-wheeled tippers were containing 50% brick, 25% concrete, and as you can see down here at the bottom we've got a progress bar totting up to 75%, and let's say that the remaining 25% was clay. That adds up to 100%. We can enter any specific notes about this load if we want, and then hit add to add those actuals to the project. The form then refreshes so that you can enter another waste stream if you so need. If you go back to project home and the site waste management plan home, back to the actuals, you'll see that we've got our first actual tonnages being entered here against the forecast. Nearing the end now, we'll go to tab 8, which is regarding the ongoing periodic reviews of the swamp. So as the page instructs, the site waste management plan should be checked regularly to identify the reasons for any significant deviations away from the initial swamp, and you can use the table below to keep a log of when the plan was reviewed and what the outcomes of that review were. It should be done every 3 months as a minimum, but it's recommended that this is done monthly so that any deviations or problems are caught early on. So hit the add button and enter the meeting record note summary in the box provided. The all required information button shouldn't be ticked until the last periodic review has been undertaken. Finally, we'll have a look at tab 9, which is the final review of the overall swamp. So as the page instructs, this section should be filled in within 3 months of the project being completed on site. And what's done is that declarations are signed using the radio buttons, and a statement reviewing how successful the implementation of the swamp was is inputted. Any deviations from the original plan should be inputted. A cost estimate of the savings resulting from the implementation of the swamp should be entered in here, and any successes or lessons learned to be carried forward to the next project should be entered in here. Finally, click here to bring through the actual figures in comparison to the forecast, and then tick the confirmation to say that the final review was done within 3 months of the project finish. And lastly, tick the final all required information button to get that last green tick in the swamp progress table. This last radio button here should be left blank. United Utilities signature saying that United Utilities is happy with the way the whole plan has been carried out. Finally, hit save. On the Site Waste Management Plan home, the last thing to do is print off a copy of the completed Site Waste Management Plan for upload to the project file on Business Collaborator. And that concludes this training video.